What if a pseudoscience could hold a mirror to a nation's soul? In America, the sacred ideal of freedom is not one story, but a chorus of conflicting voices. It is the rugged individualist and the anxious planner, the chaotic creator and the paralyzed intellectual wrestling with the same promise. This project explores that tension through an unexpected lens. The ancient belief in blood-type we trace how this foreign framework bizarrely amplifies, distorts, and reveals the deepest psychological currents of the American experiment, where defining oneself is the ultimate and most divisive liberty. In the American imagination, freedom is both a birthright and a battlefield. A promise so vast it often feels like a mirror reflecting back 1,000 different faces. To navigate this contradiction, many have turned to an unlikely guide, the pseudoscientific belief that your blood type B, O, or AB shapes your personality. A framework born in early 20th century Japan that found fertile ground in the United States. This isn't about medical fact. It's about cultural meaning. It offers a ready-made taxonomy for a society that simultaneously craves and fears a way to slot the overwhelming complexity of self into 4 neat boxes while still claiming each box represents a unique, authentic truth. The blood type paradigm becomes a strange Rosetta Stone, translating the national obsession with self-definition into a language of innate predisposition. It allows us to ask, if freedom is the project of becoming who you are, what if who you are was partly pre-written in your veins? This lens magnifies the core tensions of the American experiment. The rugged, self-reliant type O archetype echoes the frontier myth, the solitary pioneer who sees dependence as a moral failure. Yet in a hyper-connected world, that very autonomy can mutate into profound isolation. The meticulous, anxiety-ridden type A mirrors the meritocratic engine, the belief that order and hard work build a fortress of security, even as that same system can feel like a gilded cage where one misstep threatens everything. The spontaneous, chaotic type B embodies the bohemian rejection of routine, the artist or entrepreneur who defines liberty as the absence of structure, a path that often leads to financial precarity and social alienation in a culture that equates stability with virtue. Finally, the complex, indecisive type A, B holds up a mirror to the modern cognitive overload, the strategist who sees all sides and thus can commit to none, paralyzed by possibility in a landscape that demands unwavering conviction. These aren't deterministic cages, but amplified predispositions, cultural pressures that exaggerate innate tendencies. America doesn't create these types. It provides the stage where their struggles become emblematic. The typo's war against community, the typo's fortress of control, the typo's flight from convention. The type ABS paralysis in the face of choice each is a psychological case study in how the nation's foundational myth plays out in daily life. The blood type framework resonates because it offers a simplified map for a complex journey in a country where the question, "Who are you?" is both the first and last thing asked. Having a shorthand for identity is powerfully seductive. It provides a narrative for your strengths and an excuse for your flaws, all wrapped in the guise of ancient wisdom. It allows the individual to say, "This is my nature," while still participating in the great American project of self-invention. Because even within a type, the expression is supposedly unique. Ultimately, this borrowed schema reveals that the American obsession with freedom is not a singular, heroic narrative. It is a chorus of conflicting temperaments, each singing a different melody of what it means to be free. The pioneer's solitude, the planner's ladder, the wanderer's open road, the integrator's nuanced pathies are all variations on a theme so vast it can contain them all, and in doing so, exposes the beautiful, exhausting, and fundamentally unsettled promise at the heart of the experiment, that the freedom to define yourself is the most universal and divisive liberty of all. The blood type personality theory, an import from early 20th century Japan, found fertile ground in America's identity-obsessed soil, not as a science, but as a cultural mirror. It offers a prepackaged narrative for the exhausting, open-ended project of self-definition. In a society where the question, "What do you do?" is a proxy for "Who are you?" having a blood-based blueprint for temperament provides a comforting, almost deterministic starting point. It transforms the anxiety of infinite possibility into the manageable task of embodying a type. This is where the American twist becomes clear. The framework doesn't just describe A person who learns they are a type A may unconsciously lean into meticulous planning, interpreting any spontaneous urge as a betrayal of their nature. The label becomes a script, and the national drive for authenticity paradoxically encourages people to perform a simplified, essentialized version of themselves. The theory's power lies in its vagueness. It's specific enough to feel personal, broad enough to apply to anyone. It's a Rorschach test for the American soul, where we see what we want to see about our own potential for freedom. Consider how corporate wellness programs or dating app algorithms might subtly incorporate these categories, turning temperament into a marketable trait. The type O's leadership is sought in startups. The type B has creativity in advertising. The type O's reliability in project management. The culture commodifies these archetypes, creating a feedback loop where the pursuit of freedom is channeled into economically useful forms of self. The very act of choosing a type O, declaring him a type B, so I can't stick to a routine as an exercise of American liberty, a self-authoring move. Yet it's a liberty that risks locking the individual into a self-fulfilling prophecy. The framework subtly shifts the burden of freedom from create yourself from scratch to discover and perfect the self that is already written in your blood. This is a profound cultural negotiation. The American myth promises you can be anyone, but the blood type theory suggests you already are someone specific. And your freedom is the process of aligning your life with that biological truth. It resolves the terror of the blank page by providing a faint, pre-existing outline. The tension isn't between the type and freedom, but between the multiplicity within the type and the singular narrative the label provides. A type AB isn't just conflicted. They are the living embodiment of the American dilemma of holding two contradictory ideas at one state. Belief in rugged individualism and the need for community. The dream of limitless reinvention and the craving for a stable core. The theory's ultimate resonance is that it makes the internal, external, the psychological, political. Your blood type becomes a tiny, personal constitution, a foundational law you must interpret and live by. In a nation founded on a similar document, this feels deeply familiar. The American obsession with freedom is thus refracted through this lens, not as a single path, but as a spectrum of constitutional interpretations, each valid, each in tension with the others, all searching for a more perfect union between the self they were given and the self they are free to become. The promise of America is that the experiment never ends. The tragedy and the beauty is that the subject of the experiment is always you. The blood type framework, then, is not a prophecy, but a mirror, one that reflects the fragmented soul of the American Freedom Project back unto itself. It provides a language for the internal conflicts that the national myth of radical self-creation often glosses over. In a culture that simultaneously demands you author your own life and then judges you for the story you tell. These types offer a pre-written chapter, a starting point that absolves the terror of the blank page. The type O solitude is no longer just a personal failing, but a rugged archetype. The type as anxiety is reframed as disciplined vigilance. The type B's instability becomes artistic authenticity. The type ABS's indecision is elevated to complex wisdom. This translation of inner chaos into legible, almost noble temperament is a profound psychological relief. It converts the overwhelming burden of infinite possibility into the manageable task of perfecting a given design. The system's genius is its adaptability. It doesn't impose a single path to freedom, but offers for different constitutions for the pursuit. It makes the abstract, anxious quest for self. You are not endlessly becoming. You are discovering and optimizing a pre-existing operational manual written in your bloodstream. Yet this comfort comes at a cost. The very act of choosing a type, of saying I am a type B, therefore I cannot be tied down, is an act of self-limitation disguised as liberation. It outsources the authority of the self to a pseudo-scientific schema. The American promise was that you could be anyone. The blood type theory suggests you already are someone specific, and your freedom is merely the process of aligning with that biological imperative. It creates a feedback loop where the culture's demand for authentic self-expression is satisfied by the performance of a simplified, marketable archetype. Corporate wellness programs and dating algorithms then codify these performances, turning temperament into a commodity. The pioneer, the builder, the wanderer, and the integrator are not just psychological profiles. They become economic roles, each a profitable expression of liberty. The theory thus captures the core paradox of American freedom. the more you use it to define yourself. The more you are defined by the system that sold you the definition. Ultimately, the blood type phenomenon is a cultural symptom, a folk psychology for a nation suffering from the vertigo of its own ideals. It is the attempt to find a stable core true self encoded in biology in a society that constantly tells you to reinvent that very self. The tragedy is that in seeking a fixed constitution for the soul, individuals may cage themselves within a label, mistaking the map for the territory. The beauty, however, is in the collective chorus it reveals. America's experiment requires all these modes of being: the solitary frontiersman to push boundaries, the meticulous architect to build lasting structures, the chaotic innovator to imagine new worlds, and the conflicted integrator to navigate the contradictions. The blood types do not dictate destiny, but they illuminate the different, often clashing melodies that make up the national song of freedom. The conclusion is not that your blood type determines your fate, but that in America we have willingly let such a faint outline become a cage, all while calling it the key. The ultimate freedom, perhaps, lies in recognizing the outline for what it is: a useful, limiting story, and having the courage to draw beyond it, to hold the contradictions without needing a label to resolve them, and to understand that the most American act may be to finally outgrow the very archetypes we use to find our way. The promise was never to discover a pre-written self, but to write and rewrite the self in the full, terrifying and glorious light of unbounded possibility. The experiment continues, not in the blood, but in the relentless, untyped act of becoming. Unlock your freedom beyond blood type. Subscribe and hit like.